We're live on multiple platforms. We're going to be learning about law and having some fun doing so. I've got a bit of a head cold, decoherence and energy. Let me go ahead and turn that up just a little bit. There we go. We're watching Supermarket Sweepstakes on Tubi with David Ruprecht, one of my favorite shows. You won't be able to see it, but you'll definitely be able to hear it. And if you'd like to watch along or watch your own episode, check it out on Tubi for free, non-sponsored. And I watch Tubi every day. It's simple. It gets things done. It's better than Plex. Plex sucks. All those other ones, really, they absolutely suck and just drain your battery. But Tubi, I could play Tubi like all day long on my phone, even my cheap phone, and it won't drain my battery, and I get to watch Supermarket Sweepstakes all day. They got other shows on there as well, like Outer Limits and Twilight Zone, but man, I'm a huge fan of Supermarket Sweepstakes. David Ruprecht is like just one of the best hosts, and just one of the best people overall that I've had the pleasure of absorbing into my hyperthymatic brain. All right, here we go. Let's listen while I compose.
While Betsy's grinding coffee beans, Cindy's grabbing cans of coffee. Oh, look, one
Grabbing cans of coffee. Those coffees are like 10 pounds a piece or something, and you can only grab 5 of them.
Attention shoppers! Attention shoppers! The manager special for today is hot chili beans.
Ooh, you're close. Go get those chili beans.
Betsy, she just earned $100 for the coffee. Now she's going for $200. And yes, she finds the can with the red star.
Nice. She got the chili beans.
Our Millstone coffee grinder sure is getting a workout today.
Yeah, don't go for the coffee grinder. For the amount of time it takes to go for the coffee grinder.
Keep shopping, of course.
Oh, she's smart. You end up losing by going for the coffee. It only seems like you're going to get a lot out of it. Now, I've already gone ahead and started a little bit. Let me pause this. Now, I've already gone ahead and started a little bit of what we'll be doing. And so, let's see. Would you please teach me all of U.S. law from the very beginning? And then the last one we did, yes and no. We have to talk about the invention of every law, their codes, history, etc. This is not to be rushed and is to be accurate and very long. Year by year chronology. Cool. And then let's write page 1. If this sample approach is what you want, let's listen to this and see if this was what I want.
Absolutely. This project deserves maximum rigor, depth, and patience. Here's how we'll move forward. Method for the book. Each section will cover one calendar year in sequence, beginning with 1756, observing the local, colonial, British, and later federal context in granular detail. Every time a significant regulation, act, ordinance, customary rule, or code is created, debated, enforced, defied, or transformed, we will state the law's name, code, or common nickname,
yes.
Provide who invented it, when, and why. Describe its mechanism of enforcement and contention. Decode. Who benefited? Who was targeted? Did it apply by consent or coercion? Trace changes, court cases, and repeals if pertinent. Each operator, king, governor, general, legislator, judge, merchant, religious leader, rebel, etc., will be named as they shape/wield rules. Attention to the excluded. Women, poor men, enslaved people, indigenous tribes are not afterthoughts, but will be documented as subjects of law, even where denied a voice. When a law receives an official citation/chapter, i.e. Stamp Act of 1765,
I'm so sorry.
Royal Proclamation 1763,
oh, hang on. I knew I screwed something up.
USC, etc.
I knew I screwed something
its
up.
Formal statutory reference, or the earliest...
I had to check. I knew I screwed something up. I don't have my screensaver off. There we go. I'm such a silly beans.
Absolutely. This
Okay,
project deserves
we don't have to listen to more of that, but yeah, we're gonna produce page 1, Let me just see if I've got that going. Good. Okay, great. I've got that going. I had that on starting soon. All right. Let's produce page 1. We'll go, great. Love this project. Proud of you. Let's gen page 1. And only page 1, because we're going 250 words, single-spaced. And I want to see if that's long enough for what I'm trying to produce, because I want it to be legal paperwork, like A9 or whatever that is, and then written out in LaTeX. That way it's beautified and overleaf. I don't think page 1 is long enough. This will end up being scholastic. Also, I didn't put it on the correct one. I've got to put it on Gemini 3. There we go. So we're going to go 400 words per page, single-spaced. Oh, I forgot to put single-spaced. I wonder if she's going to end up doing double-space. Which isn't necessarily terrible or troublesome, because when I reduce it to single-space, I should come out to be about 250 to 300 words per page. But I'm liking 400. Oh, 580 is even better.
You are absolutely right. To capture the scholastic depth of illegal codes, the players, and the complex history of non-consent, 400 words allows us to properly dissect the invention of these laws, rather than just summarizing them. Here is page 1, revised, expanded to meet the scholastic standard and the 400-word minimum. Page 1, 1756, the neighborhood under watch. The year is 1756. The neighborhood of North America is not a united country, but a loose collection of 13 separate colonial yards, each operating under a charter granted by the ultimate landlord, King George II of Great Britain. The legal framework holding this neighborhood together is a patchwork of English common law, royal proclamations, and the Acts of Trade and Navigation. These navigation acts, specifically 12 Car 2, C18 from 1660 and subsequent amendments, are the primary clubhouse rules of the era. They dictate that all goods coming into or out of the colonies must be carried on British ships with British crews. The intent is mercantilism, the economic theory that the neighborhood exists solely to enrich the landlord. However, in 1756, the enforcement of these laws is erratic, a period historians later dubbed salutary neglect. The operators of this system, royal governors appointed by the king, often look the other way, while colonial merchants like the Hancock family in Boston engage in rampant smuggling with the French and Dutch. This creates a two-tiered legal reality: the written law, the Navigation Acts, which forbids trade, and the actual practice, the smuggler's economy, which sustains the colonies. The consent of the governing is non-existent here. The colonists have no vote in Parliament, the British clubhouse, but they accept the rules largely because the rules are not being enforced. But 1756 marks a turning point. The 7 Years' War, known locally as the French and Indian War, has officially been declared after fighting began 2 years prior in the Ohio Valley. This conflict is not a war of the people. It is a war of empires triggered by land speculators. Young George Washington, a surveyor and militia officer representing the Virginia elite, had sparked the conflict while trying to secure land claims for the Ohio Company, a private corporation of wealthy Virginians hoping to sell land they did not own to settlers who could not afford it. To fight this war, the British Crown sends Lord Loudon to America as commander-in-chief. Loudon introduces a new, terrifying precedent: the quartering of troops. He demands that colonial assemblies pay for the housing and feeding of British soldiers. When they resist, citing their rights as Englishmen, Loudon threatens to use force. This is a critical moment in the history of American law. It reveals that the rights the colonists thought they had, property rights, privacy, and legislative autonomy, were merely privileges granted by the king, revocable at any time. The colonial elites, who viewed themselves as the rightful rulers of their own backyards, are suddenly reminded that they are merely tenants. Simultaneously, the legal machinery of the writs of assistance begins to turn. These are general search warrants, authorized under the writs of the Court of Exchequer in England, that allow customs officials to enter any house or ship to search for smuggled goods, without specifying what they are looking for. Unlike modern warrants, which require probable cause, these writs are permanent, transferable, and virtually unlimited. In 1756, they are technically legal under British law, but they violate the unwritten constitutional understanding of the colonists that a man's home is his castle. This friction between the imperial need for revenue and the colonial desire for privacy sets the stage for the Fourth Amendment decades later. But for now, the law is clear. The king's officers can break down your door, and you have no vote to stop them. Word count, approximately 580 words. This depth allows us to cite the specific acts, navigation acts, 12 Car 2, and the specific legal mechanisms, writs of assistance, while introducing the key players, Washington, Loudon, the Ohio Company. Shall we proceed to page 2, covering the rest of 1756? Page 2, 1756, the smuggler's economy and the failure of union. While the British Army struggled to organize its forces
Hang on a second. We're getting off track here. Well, she's accurate. She's not doing it to that of what I want. Hang on a sec here. So let's gen page 2. But remember, there we go. Oh, you better get it. You know as well as I do that it's number 3, I think. Alright, here we go.
Here is page 2, continuing our scholastic history of the American clubhouse, using the Little Rascals framework to decode the legal inventions of 1756 to 1757. Page 2, 1756 to 1757, the hall monitors take over. By late 1756, the big club in London decided that the local kids running the American backyards were too messy to be trusted. The king's top enforcer, Lord Loudon, arrived with a rule book that the locals had never seen, let alone voted on. His primary tool was a legal invention known as the Rule of 1756. In the clubhouse world, this was like the big bully changing the rules of tag in the middle of the game. Historically, it was a maritime doctrine declared by the British Admiralty courts. It stated that if a neutral European nation, like the Dutch, didn't allow the colonists to trade with them during peacetime, they couldn't suddenly open their yards for trade during wartime. Why did this matter? Because the colonial cool kids, the wealthy merchants in Newport and Boston, were getting rich trading lunch money, sugar and molasses, with the French West Indies. The Rule of 1756 gave the British Navy, the hull monitors, the legal cover to seize American ships. This wasn't a law passed by a legislature. It was a judicial fiat, a rule made up by judges in London to benefit the British Treasury. It introduced a terrifying concept to the American neighborhood: vice admiralty jurisdiction. In a normal game of law, common law, If you were accused of smuggling, you got a trial by a jury of your peers, meaning your friends in the neighborhood would decide if you were guilty. Since everyone was smuggling, American juries almost always said not guilty. But the Vice Admiralty courts were different. These were clubhouse tribunals. There was no jury. There was only one judge, appointed by the king. Even worse, the judge operated on a commission system. If he found you guilty and confiscated your ship, he got a percentage of the loot. It was a rigged game. The players, the colonists, were being judged by the referees, the judges, who were betting on the outcome. As 1757 began, the friction moved from the sea to the living room. Lord Loudon demanded that the colonial cities provide housing for his redcoats. He cited the Mutiny Act, a British law passed by Parliament. The local club leaders, like the Massachusetts Assembly, argued back, saying, "We didn't vote for the Mutiny Act. Our charter says we make our own rules about housing." This was the classic clubhouse versus neighborhood conflict. The local elites claimed they were protecting the rights of the people, but they were really protecting their own authority to be the boss of their own yards. The common kids, the farmers, bakers, and laborers, were caught in the middle. They didn't vote for the Mutiny Act, but they also didn't vote for the Massachusetts Assembly leaders who were arguing about it. They just saw soldiers with muskets demanding to sleep in their barns. To solve this, the British Prime Minister William Pitt invented a new strategy, the subsidy. He essentially bribed the colonies. He told the local clubs, "If you raise the armies and house the soldiers, we will reimburse you." This flooded the neighborhood with British gold and silver. It quieted the complaints for a moment, but it established a dangerous precedent. The big club could buy compliance. The local laws were becoming secondary to whoever had the biggest purse. The structure of the future Constitution, specifically the Third Amendment prohibiting quartering of troops, was being written in the anger of this moment. The founders, who were currently serving as junior officers or local politicians, were taking notes. They realized that whoever controls the army and the courts controls the clubhouse, and they were determined to ensure that next time they would be the ones holding the keys. Word count, 610 words. Key legal concepts invented and applied. The Rule of 1756. Administrative maritime law created by judges, not legislation. Vice Admiralty jurisdiction. Trial without jury. Profit incentivized judging. The Mutiny Act. Military law applied to civilians. Precursor to quartering acts. Subsidy power of the purse. Using federal imperial funds to override local resistance. Shall we move to page 3?
Heck
1758?
I don't know about you guys, but I'm loving this.
Here is page 3 of the Clubhouse Chronicles, moving into 1758, 1759. We explore how the big club, Britain, uses general warrants to break into lockers, and how the local elites realize the game is rigged. Page 3, 1758 to 1759, breaking into the lockers. By 1758, the war for the playground was turning. The British big club had spent massive amounts of allowance money to build a huge fleet and army. They captured the strategic fort at Louisburg and the gateway to the west, Fort Duquesne, renaming it Pittsburgh after the guy with the checkbook, William Pitt. The neighborhood kids, the colonists, were cheering because their side was winning. But while the party was going on, the hall monitors were quietly changing the rules of privacy. This introduced one of the most hated inventions in the history of Anglo-American law, the writ of assistance. In a normal clubhouse, if a monitor suspects a kid has stolen candy, they need a specific reason to search that kid's locker. This is called specific probable cause. But the British customs officers wanted to check everyone's lockers, all the time, just in case. They dredged up an old rule from the reign of King Charles II, the Act of Frauds of 1662, which authorized the Court of Exchequer in London to issue writs of assistance. A writ of assistance was a golden ticket for search and seizure. It was a generic, fill-in-the-blank warrant. It didn't have a name on it. It didn't expire. It didn't specify what they were looking for. A customs officer could hold this paper and walk into any warehouse, shop, or private home in Boston or Salem, break down the door, and tear the place apart, looking for uncustomed goods, smuggled French molasses or Dutch tea. Even worse, the writ commanded all local sheriffs and regular people to assist the officer in tearing the house apart, hence the name Writ of Assistance. The colonial merchants, the cool kids, like James Otis and John Hancock, were furious, not because they cared about the poor kids' privacy, but because their lockers were full of illegal French contraband. This is a critical distinction in our history. The fight for the Fourth Amendment, protection against unreasonable search and seizure, didn't start because the government was harassing poor people. It started because the government was harassing wealthy business owners. In 1759, the king died, George II, and by law, all the old writs expired 6 months after his death. This gave the colonists a window to challenge the entire system. The merchants of Boston hired James Otis Jr., a brilliant but fiery lawyer, to argue that these writs were illegal. Otis didn't just argue the technicalities. He argued clubhouse philosophy. He claimed that even though Parliament, the big club, had passed the law allowing these writs, the law itself was void because it violated the Constitution, the unwritten...
Prism screwed up my aspect ratio.